Hey everyone, this is the newest episode. Finally, I got a game of Aphelios. This is delayed. I'm gonna be honest, this game is extremely complicated. The video is probably gonna end up being pretty long. But I promise it's an interesting game, and more importantly, I can't actually guarantee that I know all the best moves. I'll try to provide suggestions and explanations, but I don't actually know all the objective best moves because it's so complicated. Uh, Despite that, let's get into the game so that the video isn't too long. And first we have, so the matchup is, okay, I forgot to mention, the matchup is between Pepsi-Cola and Colby versus Goblin and Kagemaru, however you pronounce that name. And this was played in Annie Desu's 2v2 tournament. So in the original game, the two of them are discussing their plays, as are their opponents. Between Zoe Aphelios, which is essentially in the old Zoe Diana Invoke with Atrocity Splash, versus a Nivea Rekindler, which added, I believe, Gluttony. But overall, this is pretty similar to the old deck, but now it has Aphelios in it, which I do think the deck could use a few more changes. Well, it also has the Fang, but there are several changes. I think there could be more changes in the future, but for now, since this was right after the expansion, this is the list they brought. So here we do have turn 1 Zoe, but you shouldn't really expect this to level, because they have Vile Feast, Avalanche, Withering Wail, Grasp, and Nivea's. So overall, you just want to get the the star charts while you can. Now, I do want to make note of this. In this position, you have the option of either blocking or not blocking. They decided against blocking here, because they say that they don't really need the health that badly, because between star shaping and fangs, and the fact that their opponent's deck doesn't really do any face damage until post like turn 10 when Anivia's leveled up, they aren't really that afraid of taking some chip damage. And the main upside of this is that they don't want their opponent to find the most critical cards, such as avalanches, too early. So it does delay it if it's near the top of their deck instead of in their hand. I'm personally a fan of blocking just because you're gonna end up tanking basically 2 damage from it every round. But it's not. It is a pretty close decision. I do think there is a lot of merit to not blocking, and I just wanted to point out that it's a crossroads you should consider. But in this position, they chose not to, and it's a perfectly valid decision. So now in this position, they just want the extra star charts, so they play it before attacking. And of course in here, you Equinox doesn't have any important triggers. Like, you can use it to deny 1 draw, but it's better to get your own draw because yours comes with a 2/2 and a draw, whereas the other one just denies the draw. It is, I mean, it's usually better to draw a card than to deny your opponent draw, unless your opponent has really few cards, especially if it comes with the extra 2/2. So now they Vile Feast the Zoe, so it dies, but that's fine. And in this position, okay, well, after our opponent passes. So in this position, do you or do you not play the messenger? You can feel free to make your own decision, but the key question you should ask when you make this decision is, do I or do I not want to block with the messenger? And the key is that, well, first of all, if you're okay with tanking essentially 4 damage by not blocking on turn 2, after all, if you're not blocking turn 2, you know that it's going to hit you in the face a second time on turn 4. So if you're okay with tanking 4 damage for that trade, I personally don't think that you block with the messenger either. I mean, it does deny them 1 damage from the Spiderling, but overall, I prefer saving the spell mana. You're gonna play Mountain Scryer, which means that the Spiderling is at most gonna hit once. The second time is not really gonna matter, even if you put Scryer in range of Avalanche. It's not a big concern. Meanwhile, I think it's just good to have 2 spell mana, because the thing is, When I discussed this with them, they said that the main reason they played it and didn't care about their spell mana is because they don't have that many spells they want to play. But the thing about spell mana is that you don't have to have spells you want to play right away, because if you only have 1 or 2 spells that you don't expect to play until much later, but as long as your hand is mana efficient for the meantime, you can have that spell mana every round if you just save it 1 time. So that what that means is that, like, if you save it just once, just delay the messenger for 1 round, you get 2 spell mana for 5 rounds, basically, or something like that. So overall, it's just good long term. It makes your turns much more comfortable in the future. So I strongly prefer not playing the messenger here. So they play it even though they don't really plan to block with it unless they attack with the Spiderling. The main benefit is to deny them from attacking with Spiderling. Now, you'll see in a moment that they actually get punished for playing the messenger, but we'll get into that in a minute. Okay, so they had this stuff on their overlay. I'm not too sure what app that is, but I can't remove it. So in this position, you always pick Cosmic Inspiration. Cosmic Inspiration is, first of all, if you can guarantee that you behold a Celestial and you can play Cosmic Inspiration turns 5, 6, 7, it's just tremendously powerful. Assuming, of course, your deck isn't extremely slow. Well, actually, it's good for being extremely slow, but assuming that you're not dying on the board, basically, Cosmic Inspiration is just so good. Meanwhile, the Trickster and Written Stars just doesn't do that much. I mean, Written Stars is actually pretty decent in this deck, but I mean, it just can't compare to Cosmic Inspiration. However, the key here is that in this position, I bid you to take note. If we had held the messenger back on round 4, on round 3, then we would be able to play Cosmic Inspiration round 5, and it would be guaranteed because we would behold the Celestial in hand. So this is a kind of a punish. Not only that, but the messenger would be 1 mana, which would be more efficient were we to get the opportunity to do it after with our Mountain Squire still alive. So now that it does delay the turn of our Cosmic Inspiration, which is definitely a punish. I forgot to mention another reason I did like keeping the messenger is actually because you might get the discount on the Mountain Scryer, but I don't think it's a big factor, so you shouldn't really concern yourself over it. So in this position, we play Zoe, and they passed. So it's okay. Okay, so you should know one thing. While our opponent passed, and we have the option of passing to deny them 4 mana, the problem is that their deck is very mana inefficient, even if we don't do anything. So specifically to this matchup, because our opponent's deck is so inflexible in terms of their cards, like they basically just want to play Anivias, Rekindlers, Harrowings, and Avalanches, basically, there's not much reason to pass for their mana. You can just play your cards, and then they'll spend their mana if they can, and they won't spend their mana if they can. It almost doesn't matter whether or not you pass. The only real consideration is like maybe Catalyst of Eons, but in this position they would have played it a long time ago. So now again in this position you have essentially 3 options. So here they're considering Spacey Sketcher. They don't do it right away. So now I want you to take a look at this position and think about what you would do in this position, how you're planning your next 2 to 3 turns, and how that affects what you do. So now, whether or not you took a minute to think, I'm going to discuss the way you should approach this. So, first of all, you want to make sure that you can play Cosmic Inspiration. And if you play it next round, as is, your opponent could, for example, kill your messenger to deny you the Behold effect of the Cosmic Inspiration, which will screw with your ability to actually trigger the Cosmic Inspiration. Now, the thing about that is that you can actually play Super Cool Star Chart on the stack if they choose to grasp. And in that position, you essentially force them to grasp your messenger if they choose to do it. And at the same time, you still get the Cosmic Inspiration off. So it's not really a concern. If you're considering whether or not you're scared of them using grasp to cancel Cosmic Inspiration. You don't need to be, simply because we have super cool star chart. Alternatively, we also have Spacey Sketcher. Sorry, I was trying to remember the name. A Spacey Sketcher, which would allow us to discard Dusk Petal and also guarantee the Behold. However, the main downside of this is that the Cosmic Inspirations shines the most if we go wide. If we were to play Spacey Sketcher now and they play Avalanche, then that will make our Cosmic Inspiration a lot worse. Of course, it will still be really, really good, but Spacey Sketcher is better after we play Cosmic Inspiration, so we should focus on getting our Cosmic Inspiration out before we go wide. There's also the option of playing the Fangs, but I don't like this option for, well, similar reasons. First of all, our whole board dies to Avalanche. We're playing out our units before our Cosmic Inspiration again, and also we tap out of mana, so our future turns are going to be much more restricted. So that pretty much comes down to super cool star chart, and the only question is, how mana efficient do we need to be? Should we play super cool star chart next round instead, at the cost of paying one more mana, or maybe even a future turn down the line? Now, if I'm completely honest, I actually prefer not playing super cool star chart for the reason I listed earlier. It's because I'm not really scared of them killing my doggo, simply because I can play super cool star chart on the stack. Now, the main downside is that they could, for example, open Avalanche, but it's a really, really weak Avalanche. It kills their board. It kills more of their board than it kills our board. Even though it does draw them cards, they would be spending their round 6 mana instead of their round 5 mana. So I actually slightly prefer playing super cool star chart next round, but playing it this round is fully meritable. I know that was a long discussion just to play super cool star chart, but I do want to explain that all of these things are to be considered in a position like this. It's actually about the same whether you play it now or later. So you had the option to play either Charger or Serpent. Challenger is not that valuable, and because we are going to play Inspiration, both of them are going to have 3 health. So you want to choose Charger simply because it has more attack, obviously, and also they're both 0 cost, so the mana difference isn't really a big deal. And even if they manage to kill Scryer, it doesn't make a big difference. So in this position, we could have super cool star chart instead of the Charger. Not really an upside, so overall playing last turn is perfectly fine. But my main point is that the only consideration for whether you play it last round is mana efficiency, and you shouldn't really worry about the Inspiration's premise to play. Now that we top deck Aphelios, this is again interesting. So the thing is that if we play Aphelios, after it's going to, what you choose is very critical, but normally speaking, in this position, you probably want to pick Crescendum. However, the downside is that you won't, you have to be aware of which ones you can pick. So you can pick either deal 3 damage or gain lifesteal. Now, depending on what our opponent does, we can actually gain, we can actually play gain a second moon weapon this turn by playing 2 cards. So now Pepsi and Colby chooses to play the Fangs, which is important. You do have 2 of these 4-drops, and you want to play them sooner rather than later, because if possible, ideally later you want to be more flexible with your mana, because on bigger turns, if we, for example, get Star Shaping, you're going to want to be able to play your large Celestial units rather than spending all of your mana on such medium cost cards that are both not very high tempo and also a bit slower. So it's not really but at the same time, it doesn't really give you like a lot of value. It doesn't go wide. It just doesn't really help you do much of anything in the late game. You really want to be getting the Fangs out around rounds 4 to 7 if possible, because rounds 8 to 10 it's not aggressive enough, and it's not big enough either. Of course, it doesn't matter too much thanks to Cosmic Inspiration. Now, our opponent plays Ruination, And this is really important because while they do this, we can actually play 3 units. We have multiple options. First of all, we have um, we Aphelios plus Serpent plus Crescendum, which allows us to get another moon weapon. Right? Yeah. So if you play Aphelios, it starts counting for 2 cards. First, you play Crescendum. Well, actually, the order doesn't matter. But once you play Crescendum and the Serpent, it counts as 2 cards. So you can get another moon weapon in your hand. You can choose Lifesteal or deal 3 damage. I personally prefer the Lifesteal one here, not so much because of the health, but because you can use it to give your units 2 health, so that you can even use it on the defense turn, whereas deal 3 damage, it kind of depends on what they play. It's also fine, but if they just play another Nivea, you can't really cycle it into the stun that you might want or the overwhelm that you might want. I do prefer the Aphelios plus Crescendum just because it gives another moon weapon, but the other option is Spacey Sketcher. Whoa, not Zoe plus Mountain Goat plus Serpent. Now the upside of this is that it gives you a super cool star chart instead of an extra moon weapon, and it also allows you to get a gem, and save 2 spell mana. Now, the reason I prefer Aphelios is because Crescendum basically draws a card from your deck. Because it summons the 2-drop from your deck, it's essentially draw for 0 mana, and it does improve your top decks a little. The stats are actually bigger, so you actually deal 2 more damage. But getting Zoe out is pretty nice too. Zoe might level at this point now that you can play so many cards per turn. It has 3 health overall. Zoe might matter, so Zoe is perfectly fine too. Aphelios gives 2 extra damage, an extra moon weapon. They're both perfectly sound options. And by the way, if you pick any other option, that would be pretty questionable. Now, in this position, our opponent plays Rekindler, another critical decision. So, as you can see, they're very hurried to play Super Cool Star Chart. You shouldn't really be in such a rush to play it. There's not really any reason to. But I suppose the main reason they do it is because they want to check if they want to attack with a Nivea. They're not going to, but in this position you have lots and lots of options. Again, it's very interesting in terms of what you want to do. Now, one of the main things you want to do this round is actually stun the Rekindler. This is because if you stun the Rekindler, it's stun again next round, so you can have 6 units and they only have 1 blocker. And so, for obvious reasons, that is pretty good. So, if we commit 5 of our mana to Aphelios, that leaves us with 5 mana remaining. We definitely want to play Sketcher because it's very mana efficient, but it's not necessary. We also have an option to play the Fangs. Again, the lifesteal here is not extremely high priority, but it's not a bad option to know we have. So first thing is first, Super Cool Star Chart is perfectly fine. You just need to be aware that after you play Super Cool Star Chart, you'll have only 3 mana left after Aphelios, and then that includes the Sketcher. So you do need to realize that beforehand. And another thing is, we might want to play Sky's Descent in one of the next 3 turns, depending on what our opponent does. Specifically, Harrowing. We might want to have to counter Harrowing, so that we don't get blown out. So I do like going with both Star Chart and the Spacey Sketcher, but you're probably going to want to pick something like the Charger or the Messenger. So here they pick Trickster for a couple reasons. First of all, well, actually, mainly because of elusive, but it's not, the elusive keyword is actually not a big deal right now, simply because our opponent doesn't have blockers anyway. But it ends up working out. But in this round, you're not going to play, since you have 2 other units to play between Crescendum. Actually, wait. So if we play Gravitum, we have 5 mana left to play 2 units. We could We could play Gravitum plus Spacey Sketcher plus Crescendum, and in that position, we could. It's very efficient. We get our Crescendum, we get our 6 units, and then we save them. We save the mana. Now you play. I kind of prefer playing the Spacey Sketcher first because you still get the extra moon weapon once you play the Gravitum, but it doesn't really matter because there's no card you could receive from Spacey Sketcher that affects your decision here. Actually, there's one more option you have that I forgot to mention, and that is to discard Gravitum and then play another card, and then get Gravitum back and play it. However, the problem with this decision is that we don't necessarily have a 2-mana card we want to play. Because we don't know it's going to invoke. Now, if we pick Messenger, that would be perfectly valid, but I mean, since we have Crescendum, there's not much reason to go with that line. It's better to just play the Crescendum. Now, the best possible option here compared that we would actually play would be the Charger, and they were offered Charger, so now you have 2 options. You can either pick Charger or Crescendum. Again, I prefer Crescendum simply because you want to get it. Well, you get the 2-drop out of your deck. The Overwhelm is more valuable later than in comparison, because right now we're getting the damage guaranteed, whereas Overwhelm might be useful for the reach. And also, the other benefit of playing Crescendum is that Crescendum needs you to have essentially good unit space. Whereas if you, for example, were to I think this is the first goat, so it doesn't actually matter. But Crescendum has the option of giving you more moon weapons as well. For example, if you were to play the Charger next round, then you can't really play Crescendum, so you're not going to end up being able to cycle the moon weapons. So Crescendum ends up being dead in your hand, whereas Charger is always going to be a 1-mana 6/3 Overwhelm at worst. And that's the main reason I prefer playing Crescendum here. And now in this position, again, you decide whether or not to block. If you're not going to block in the previous rounds, there's not much upside to doing it now. But the thing is that they could have, for example, a Vile Feast, kill the goat, and then, I mean, you can end up pulling the egg with the serpent, but it doesn't really make a big difference whether you kill the Anivia or not. So there's really not much reason to take this block now if you're gonna tank the damage earlier. So they thought about blocking with the Aphelios, but damaging the Aphelios is pretty sus. The upside of killing Anivia just doesn't really exist, because either they harrowing and we Skies Descend later, or they don't harrowing and it doesn't matter whether or not they have this Anivia. So now we have 6 attackers and they have just Anivia to block. What this means is that the only way they survive is if they play things like Double Whale, or Harsh Winds plus Flash Freeze, or Grasp plus... Actually, I don't think Grasp works at all, so I think those are pretty much the only options. But Grasp? Like 2 Grasps might work. I think they only run 1 or something. But in this position, because their main source of surviving is freezes and frostbites, I mean, you wanna put the gem on the lowest attack unit so that your attack is most evenly distributed. In this position, you use the gem on the Spacey Sketcher, because also if you use it on the Zoe, it just puts more removal priority on your Zoe. So if you're gonna put the unit in a position where the only way to stop it is to either freeze it or remove it, you want to take away the downside of them taking the removal route by using it on the lower priority unit with the same stats. So they did have Harsh Winds plus Flash Freeze, which means that we lost 1 face damage because of the misplaced gem. This is actually not really a big deal. But again, now, I mean, this Crescendum is really questionable. We don't really have a time to play it. Playing the Charger out didn't really matter. So now, your options are pretty diverse. It doesn't really matter what you do. If you play Crescendum, you can cycle it and get another moon weapon, but dealing 3 damage and getting lifesteal are both kind of irrelevant right now. The main upside would be to cycle it into Gravitum, but again, that's just not a high priority at this position. I think Zoe is at like 8. I think you can just level Zoe here by playing some. Actually, you could use Crescendum just to level Zoe. You could play the Fangs. I actually prefer that now that I think about it, but I think they go for Eclipse Dragon in this position, which I don't really see much upside to. The main upside, I guess, is you have only 1 board space and it's a bit more mana efficient. But I think I actually prefer going for the Zoe level. So I'm just okay. So in this position, our opponent is in a very desperate situation because, well, overall this game pretty much came down to Cosmic Inspiration. However, there was a lot of decision points, and I thought it was still interesting to go over. So now, right now, our opponent is basically dead on the board. The only ways he survives is if he manages to get a Harrowing or a Ruination through, but if he plays Ruination, we can just play like 4 or 5 units and then open attack, so Ruination is not going to cut it. So they're going to play Harrowing, and in this position, we could try to Atrocity our Eclipse Dragon. Oh yeah, that's why they played it. But I don't really think you want to go for Atrocity win condition anytime soon here, so I mean, I don't really prefer the Eclipse Dragon. But so in this position, they have to play Harrowing. There is no reason to go for the Atrocity. You always Sky's Descent here, and the reason for that is because, well, first of all, they could have a second Flash Freeze, which I think they only run 2 of. But the thing is, if they have Flash Freeze, you can actually lose. Well, you actually do lose. You lose to the second Flash Freeze, even though it's only 1 card in the deck. Meanwhile, if we play Sky's Descent and then just attack them and still have Atrocity in case they somehow survive, there is no way we lose. It's actually impossible for us to lose, and that's why there's no reason to give them 1 out of, I don't know, 40, 30. I guess technically they probably play like 12 to 15 cards, so there's no reason to give them like that 1 in 25 chance to have the. There's no reason to give them the 1 in 25 cards in there. Okay, you know what I mean. There's no reason to let them have that option to win when you have a 100% chance to win if you play Sky's Descent. Now, as mentioned before, Zoe was at 8 out of 10, so now Sky's Descent levels Zoe. And this is the main reason I prefer leveling her, because what happens is that you can share the keywords first, and then you can open attack with your extra keywords. Now, whereas playing the Eclipse Dragon just for Atrocity feels pretty irrelevant. Especially since you have all the cards you're going to need to play for like the next 10 turns. Maybe not literally 10 turns, but this game isn't going to last more than 2, 3, 4 rounds at absolute max. So there's not really any reason to play Eclipse Dragon. Now they have 4 blockers. This is really important because now it's very easy for them to survive this open attack. And they only take, I think, what is it, 5 damage just by. So you don't even have lethal on the board right now. So now you have to play the Trickster next round. Now, I know we haven't gotten into the top decks, but you should already be thinking ahead of time and understanding exactly how this game is going to turn out. Because right now, if you play Trickster, they go from having 4 blockers to 0. And we have 6 attackers, so there's absolutely no way they survive that on the stack. The only possible way we don't represent lethal on board after playing Trickster is if they play Ruination and we cannot refill the board enough to have lethal. Well, with elusive units, which we won't because we don't have a second or our third Zoe right now. But that's the time we Atrocity, because at that point they'll have only 1 mana. With 1 mana, it's impossible for them to survive Atrocity. And now, while I am aware that we wouldn't have that if we were to go for the leveled up Zoe. I don't think it matters because I'm pretty sure we would have lethal without the atrocity. Or rather, we wouldn't need it in order to have lethal if we played the other lines, because we could have, well, for one, the charger in hand, so all of our units would have overwhelm. That changes things again. We would still have atrocity to push the extra damage. Overall, we would have extra mana. We would have probably 2 more spell mana because the other plays aren't as expensive. We would have invoked more times. So overall, I don't think that just because this atrocity wouldn't be lethal, that the play is now incorrect. I still think that leveling Zoe 2 rounds ago was better. Also, Sky's Descent would have been cheaper, most likely. So we would have more mana to do things after the Sky's Descent, and we could have played Trickster. We could have played Trickster after. Actually, we could have played the Fangs plus Trickster 2 rounds ago, and they would have had to play Ruination last round. We would refill, and then we would open attack this round. So that's what would have happened if we were to go with the other line. I didn't actually explain it that well, but even though we wouldn't have the Eclipse Dragon, we would still win this round. It would have been different. Now, I know this was a long video, but I mean, I knew this was gonna have to happen if I wanted to feature Aphelios. I hope that you found the game as interesting as I did. That's gonna be it for this analysis. I'm sorry I couldn't find all the objective best plays, but I hope you can understand why after seeing the game. I hope that it was educational nonetheless, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.